But real quick, we're gonna bring in Jay Crawford.
What?
That just goes to show you how garbage coaches is at that level.
Yeah. We tried throwing the ball. It made no sense. But and they were on they're 3 or 4 years older than me.
John Moreno had like one good year in the NFL.
With 2 first-round picks. Yeah. By the way, our 12 o'clock lunch hour, as always, is sponsored by Colleague Racing. Colleague Racing, your Northeast Ohio NASCAR team. And guys, it's sunny and nice here, but it's not as nice as what Jay's dealing with in Arizona right now.
There he is on the field.
He in his element. Look at you, Jay. Shades on. Woohoo, man.
Yeah. Listen, Tyvis, they're asking about you.
Listen, put in a good word. Tell them I'm available. If they need me to go up against somebody, tell them that you are available. Throw me that slider, and I'm going to send it across the fence, and then tell them that, you know what, just write my contract up and then send it to my agent, and if it's good, I'll sign.
Jay, he's ready to platoon with Miles Straw out in center field.
Just saying.
So get him signed up. How are things out in Goodyear right now? Beautiful? It looks amazing out there.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous weather. It's a clear, sunny day. I'm guessing the temperature's probably already in the 70s. It might be a little warmer. I know by game time it'll definitely be in the high 70s, low 80s. I got to tell you guys, I've been to Indian/Guardian spring training probably 6 or 7 times in total, even going back to the 90s when they were in Winter Haven and I was working in Columbus. But this year is different. Even I came here in 17 after they had the crazy run in 16 and lost in the World Series. And I will say there were obviously higher expectations for this team over the long haul in 17. But the feeling that I'm picking up already from day one is this team is now no longer where they were last year, where they were hoping to be successful. They have high expectations, and they were, and this is what really my takeaway from the time that I've spent around the guys already, they were crushed at the way things ended last year. They weren't, hey, what a great run, we were happy to be here. They were devastated, and they've carried that into this year in how they've worked in the offseason, the preparations that they've been going through to get ready for this season. And I will talk to a bunch of players throughout my time here, but I had a chance to sit down with Mike Chernoff for about a half hour. And my big takeaway from my conversation with him is they feel that they're very well positioned. They knew what their needs were coming into the offseason. They addressed at least 2 of those needs. And Bull, it was interesting because Mike, like you, believes that Josh Bell has another level that he can get to, which was part of the reason they went out and did this deal. So, I mean, it's filled with optimism, where last year I think it was kind of unrealistic hope. This year, it's a manageable expectation that they're going to be one of the best teams in the game.
You mentioned you talked to Mike Chernoff, the Guardians GM, who's been here a long time, obviously now. Did you get the sense from him, or if you asked him directly, did he answer, that there is some payroll flexibility for the trade deadline if they need a pitcher or something?
Yeah, so here's what I can tell you, because they're non-committal on that kind of stuff.
Sure.
They're never going to talk about future moves. But I think what fans can feel safe in this takeaway, if there is a move that needs to be made as we're approaching the trade deadline, this team is really well positioned to go out and make that move. Bull, and we've talked about it at length on this program, that this organization is loaded with young talent. And at some point, they're going to have to make the decision to keep or to move on.
Right.
And they're well positioned to do that because this is the first year in a while where there hasn't been a big hole in the lineup. Last year, we didn't know who the corner outfielders were going to be. Last year, the whole outfield was a question mark, if you remember.
That's true.
And then Quan emerged. And, I know that they were solid at center field, but, they didn't know how the corner pieces were going to go. And you get Gonzalez and Quan. So this year is so much different in that it's not an opportunity for all the young kids in the organization to get all this playing time because, like, the everyday lineup for this team is set. And you strengthen yourself dramatically by going out and filling the holes at first base and catcher. Those were the 2 glaring weaknesses. And I think Mike feels very comfortable in the guys that he's brought over. And I can tell you that although he didn't answer it directly, I can tell you that if there's a move to be made around the deadline that will be a difference maker for this club, They're not afraid to make a move, and they're well positioned to do it.
You know, Jay, let me ask you this, man. We talk about all the time. Last year, we wanted the Cavs to get that type of that type of experience in the playoffs, and so when they did get that experience in the playoffs. You know, the Cavs didn't, but the Guardians did. Have you seen guys like Quan and Gonzalez and some of the younger guys? Have you seen a little bit of different pep in their step? A little bit, you know, now that to look like, oh, I'm here. I've got that experience under my belt. We won a series. And do you think they just look more solidified and feeling like they belong at that major league level?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, G, that there's just I got here last night, so I didn't get to see any of the workouts yesterday. I've been here just a short time today where I actually wasn't doing interviews. But just in observing guys at the cage, guys taking infield, they're going through workouts before their exhibition, their spring training game later this afternoon. But it's funny because it's not just one person, it's just the feel here. It's just generally upbeat and optimistic. Where I mentioned last year from a distance, because I wasn't here last year for spring training, but just kind of as they broke spring training and came north, the feeling that I got was they were going into the season saying, well, let's see what happens. You know, we've got a lot of pieces that we like. We've got a lot of question marks. So let's see what happens. That's what, I'd say 10 to 12 Major League Baseball teams are in that space every year. It's not like that here this year. Everybody is moving with a different confidence. Everyone, I think, is building off of the success that they had last year. And they're coming into this year with real expectations. Last year, their expectations were quiet. They were discussed internally within the team. And as that amazingly surprising run continued, we kept hearing Tito and some of the other guys involved say, look, we're not shocked by this. We kind of expected this to happen. We may be a little ahead of schedule, but we knew that this team had a lot of parts. Where this year, if they don't win 90 and win the division, it's going to be in my view, it's going to be a major setback and disappointment for these guys, because they're coming here to Goodyear this year with the intention that they can win this division. And they know that Chicago's upgraded. Minnesota is always a question mark. And we know that they're not going to have as many games in the division, which means probably fewer wins that you can rack up against the Kansas Cities and Detroits of the world. But I think they're wildly optimistic about what they can accomplish. And I don't want to say it's central or bust, because you never know how a season's going to play out. We don't know is the bullpen going to have the ridiculous success from last year, this year? That's an unknown. Will some of these kids take a step back? Possibly. But one of the things that I wanted to tell you guys about was in talking to Mike Chernoff and talking about that sort of sophomore slump that we know all guys go through and how they're guarding against that. I asked him, what was it with Oscar Mercado? Like, this was a kid that proved he could do it. And he said, you know, the game is a game of adjustments. And you have to be able to make the adjustment to the adjustment that the game makes to you. And that is very difficult, guys. And it has weeded out hundreds of guys through the last decade. Guys that had initial success, but then couldn't show plate discipline or went back to bad habits. And he said in the case of Oscar, and this young players and if golfers will understand this, when you make a swing change, there's often a time of regression before you see ascension. And that happened with Oscar. He had hit sort of a plateau in his career. They made some adjustments. They made some tweaks. He really adjusted well to those and took to those and had great success. But once the game adjusted to what he was doing now, it was incumbent upon him to trust all of the changes that he made, that they were going to get him through that slump. And he wanted to regress to his old habits. And that's totally understandable. A player will oftentimes revert to what they did that got them here. And so that's going to be the mental gymnastics that guys like Steven Kwan, who I don't think is going to struggle with this at all, but Oscar Gonzalez and some of these other young guys that had great success last year, they're going to hit spells where it's a little difficult. The game becomes more difficult. It's how they get through that stretch. And can they have the discipline to rely on the habits that they've built that got them there in the first place?
I got two things. One is a question and the second is a statement. So the first one is, out of all the young guys that's there, who do you trust the most to be able to take that next step and ultimately turn into an all-star? That's first. And secondly, if you turn around, you see what they doing behind you. I can do that
Yeah.
better than anybody out there right now, and I haven't played the game in a long time. I'm just telling you. Just tell him, Jay. Tell him you know a guy. Just tell him.
I will. They actually asked if we had any tape on you. And I said, we've got a little bit from a softball game, but it just kind of shows the basics that you're working with.
They didn't get
and
my
they
best
really
play.
were impressed with your
didn't
speed.
Oh, yeah, that's there. That's there. I tell them my center field, I'll be the best center field we've ever seen
word
in
on
the
street
Guardians.
is you don't have great hips.
Don't listen. Y'all gonna cut
So
this
you know
out.
what they did?
Cruz reignited the hips.
They got your NFL scouting report, and they said decent speed but tight hips.
Yeah, tight
and
hips.
it's going to be tough for him
Listen,
to make
Jay,
that transition.
I'll have you know that I put some WD-40 on them this past week. They in tip-top shape.
He was at that Ohio State cruise, Jay. He said his hips is opened up now.
Oh, Tyvis, don't ever change, my friend. Don't ever change. To your first question, it's really interesting. Bull and I have talked about this off the air, and we've talked about it collectively as a group on the air about the guys that we think are well positioned to capitalize on that success from last year. And I got to tell you, after talking with Mike Chernoff, they know that that's always a possibility, and they've seen it happen with guys in the past, including Oscar Mercado, and there have been others. But I do think because the Guardians is an organization, the more time I spend around them, the more impressed I am. Nothing in this organization happens by accident. They're both analytic. They're looking deeply into trends in the game. One of the things that Mike Chernoff told me that just really drives home the fact that they're always thinking ahead. He said they're already anticipating ways that teams will try to turn the Guardians' advantage on the base paths into a disadvantage. So that's called playing chess while everybody else might be playing checkers. So they're thinking of ways to stop what the Guardians do, and the Guardians are already thinking of what they're going to do, and they're thinking about the changes they're going to make to make sure that those changes aren't effective. And it just really drives home how deep things are discussed at this level, and particularly within this organization. I've said this before. I know it's going to sound like I'm a homer. I've been around a lot of Major League Baseball organizations. I think I get a pretty good idea. I have a good idea of how they work and what is successful. I cannot stress enough how fortunate this organization is to have the pieces in place in Antonetti and Chernoff at the top of the food chain from a mental brain power standpoint. I feel like it's our cheat code, and we're extremely fortunate to have kept these guys. Hopefully we can continue to keep them together, and there's upside to doing it this way. Imagine, guys, I'm not saying anyone can do it, but it's so much easier to do what they're doing if you've got an unlimited checkbook. Do it with the restraints of the spending that this organization has, being a smaller market and not being able to write $35 million checks every time they want. If you can win here under these guidelines, you can do it anywhere. And so it means more if they can win here. So all these guys have been pushing the boulder up the mountain. The sense that I get in talking to Mike, and I haven't talked about this with Chris, but I imagine it's a similar thing. You don't want to walk away from that boulder when it's close to the top. You want to push it over the top. And if they win here, they're like kind of Theo Epstein status. I mean, I know Epstein did it with the Red Sox and the Cubs, but what they're doing here, guys, is nothing short of amazing. And that's not lip service. That's just being as objective as I possibly can. This front office is not just the best, one of the best in baseball. I feel they're one of the best in all of professional sports.
Jay, good stuff, buddy. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have fun out there.
Yeah,
Keep that
Ty,
suntan
I'll
on.
let you know when your tryout is.
Okay. Tell them I don't need
I'm
to.
working out. I'm throwing. So I'm ready for our showdown whenever you're ready to sit down.
You really want to?
Just let me know.
Wait a minute. You really want to feel that pain to watch a 29-year-old guy just take you smooth over the fence? That's the. You talking about putting your best pitch out there and it just Gone.
I've built my amateur career chewing guys like you up and spitting them out.
You know what? It's going to be the best bat flip I ever do in my life. I'm gonna let you know that.
See you, Jay. We'll see you.
Wait till I strike you out.
Have
I'm
fun.
flipping my glove off and
Yeah.
walking off the mound.